The night my husband reduced a woman to nothing with 6 careless words, I watched something shift behind her eyes. Not hurt, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Like she had seen men like him before, and already knew exactly how this story would end. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. I am Mr. Zaha. Thanks for tuning in today. A kind words from a man who has seen it all. Marriage are not mostly bed of roses. Sometime you need more of. More of what? Can't say. Continue watching, and you will surely know what to do in situations like this. Kindly hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So let's get started. Act 1. The world we built on appearances. The restaurant was called Maison Dorée. Gold lettering on a frosted glass door. A maitre d' in a pressed charcoal suit who called you sir and madam, like the words cost him something. White tablecloths so starched they barely moved when you sat down. The kind of place where the menu had no prices on the version they handed to guests, because if you needed to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. It was my idea to come here. That's the part one keep turning over in my mind. Even now, months later, when the dust has finally settled, and I can sit with a cup of coffee on our back porch and look at my husband across the yard without that tight, sick feeling in my chest. It was my idea. Our 14th wedding anniversary. I had made the reservation 6 weeks in advance. Spoken to someone named Claude on the phone who had the practiced warmth of a man paid to make you feel important. I'd worn the black dress Derek always said made me look like I belonged somewhere better than where we were. I wanted one perfect night. I should have known that when you want something that badly, the universe has a way of stress testing it. My name is Rachel Calloway. I'm 41 years old. I teach 11th grade English at Westbridge High School in Naperville, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago clean enough to feel safe and ordinary enough to sometimes feel invisible. I drive a silver Honda Accord with a cracked left side mirror I keep meaning to get fixed. I grade papers on Sunday evenings with a glass of Chardonnay and the TV on low. I love my students the way you love something you chose on purpose, which is different from the love that just happens to you. I also love my husband, even after everything. Maybe especially after everything. Derek Calloway is 44. He's a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distribution company called Vertex Med Supply, which sounds more impressive than it is, though Derek has never quite accepted that. He's tall, 6'1", with a kind of broad-shouldered frame that made him the most confident man in every room when we were in our 20s, and still does, though the confidence now has a harder edge to it. A sharper corner. He wears his success the way some men wear cologne, too much of it, hoping it covers something else. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's true, and because I spent too many years softening truths about Derek until they were barely recognizable. He grew up poor in Rockford, Illinois. Really poor. The kind with a space heater in one bedroom poor, government cheese in the fridge poor, wearing the same 2 pairs of jeans all through middle school and hoping nobody noticed poor. His father left when Derek was 9. His mother worked double shifts at a laundry service and still came home smelling like other people's fabric softener and her own exhaustion. Derek watched all of it. He cataloged it. He stored it somewhere deep and internal, like a wound that never fully closed, and then he spent the next 30 years running as far from it as he could. He became a man who noticed labels, who could tell the difference between a knockoff watch and the real thing from across a dinner table, who left 20% tips when he was happy and 12% when he wasn't, like the tip was a review score for the server's performance rather than a human being's livelihood. He wasn't a bad man. I need you to understand that. He was a wounded man doing what wounded men sometimes do, building a fortress out of the very things that once made him feel small. Money, status, the ability to look at someone in a service uniform and feel, for just a moment, like he was on the right side of something. I saw it. I always saw it. I just didn't say enough. We arrived at Maison Dorée at 7:30 on a Thursday evening in late October. The city had that particular autumn feeling. The air sharp and clean, the leaves on Michigan Avenue a burning amber that made everything look like a painting of itself. Derek had come straight from work. He was wearing his good charcoal suit, the one he bought at Nordstrom 2 years ago and referenced more often than any piece of clothing should be referenced. He looked handsome. He smelled like cedar and the faint ghost of his morning coffee. When he opened the restaurant door for me and put his hand briefly on the small of my back, I felt a rush of warmth for him. A reminder of who we were at our best. This is good, I thought. We needed this. Inside, the restaurant was everything I'd hoped. Soft amber lighting fell over linen-draped tables like late afternoon sun. Somewhere in the back, a jazz pianist was doing quiet, beautiful things to a Cole Porter standard. The room smelled of brown butter and something herbed and slow-cooked. Maybe 30 tables, maybe a third of them occupied, couples mostly, a few business dinners, the low murmur of expensive conversation. We were shown to our table by Claude himself, a compact man in his 50s with silver temples and the energy of someone who genuinely loved his job. He pulled out my chair. He placed our napkins in our laps. He told us about the evening specials and the way a poet might describe a landscape, with feeling, with detail, with care. Derek barely looked at him. He was already scanning the room, doing that thing he does, the unconscious inventory of who else was there, what they were wearing, how the table arrangements compared to ours. I used to find it funny. Now it just made me tired. Nice place, he said, when Claude had gone. I'm glad you like it. Little ostentatious with the gold everywhere. He nodded at the lettering on the walls, the gilded frames on the mirrors. But the tables are good. Proper spacing. I hate when they pack them in. I know. You look beautiful, by the way. He said it almost as an afterthought, but it landed warm regardless. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Happy anniversary, Derek. He smiled, and for a moment, it was the smile I fell in love with. Open, a little boyish. The smile of the man underneath all the armor. Happy anniversary, Ratch. Our waitress arrived 7 minutes later. I remember noticing her the way you notice something that doesn't quite fit a room's pattern. Not because she looked wrong, but because she looked real in a place designed to feel slightly unreal. She was around 50, maybe a year or two past, with the kind of face that doesn't announce its age so much as carry it gracefully. High cheekbones. Deep brown eyes that were alert in a way that went beyond professional attentiveness. Her hair was dark with threads of silver, pulled back neatly. She wore the restaurant's standard uniform, black shirt, black slacks, a small white apron. But she wore it the way an actor wears a costume, knowing full well it's a costume. Her name tag said Diane. Good evening, she said. Her voice was unhurried, warm without being performative. Welcome to Maison Dorée. My name is Diane, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you both with something to drink while you look over the menu? Sparkling water, I said. And maybe a wine list? Of course. She looked at Derek. Derek was looking at the menu, not at her. Bourbon, he said. Neat. Something that's actually aged, not whatever well stuff you push on the upsell. There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But I felt it. We have a very nice Blanton single barrel, Diane said, her voice unchanged. Or a Pappy Van Winkle 12-year, if you'd prefer something with a bit more depth. Pappy. Still not looking up. And don't bring it in one of those tiny pours. This isn't a tasting room. Of course, she said again. She left. I watched her go, and then I looked at Derek. You could look at her when she's talking to you, I said. Lightly. I meant it lightly. I'm reading the menu, Rachel. You can do both. He looked up then, his eyes carrying that low-grade irritation that I had learned, over 14 years, to navigate like a known stretch of rough road. I'm a customer. She's here to serve us. I'm not required to perform a social interaction every time someone asks what I want to drink. She's a person, Derek. I know she's a person. He went back to the menu. I'm just not here to make friends with the waitstaff. I let it go. I always let it go. And that silence, that small, familiar surrender, was its own kind of beginning. If you've ever watched someone you love and seen something that troubled you, but said nothing, drop a comment below. You're not alone. Diane returned with our drinks, graceful and unhurried, set them down without ceremony, and asked if we had questions about the menu. I asked about the sea base. She described it beautifully, the preparation, the sauce, the way the kitchen sourced it fresh from a specific Gulf Coast supplier 3 times a week. I was charmed. I ordered it immediately. Derek ordered the ribeye. He specified the temperature twice, told her the last time he'd ordered it medium rare at a restaurant it had come out closer to medium, and he didn't want a repeat of that. Diane absorbed this without expression, confirmed his preference, and noted it down. Also, Derek said, as she turned to go, the bread they brought, it's cold. Can you have them warm it? The bread had arrived less than 2 minutes prior and was, as far as I could tell, perfectly warm. Absolutely, Diane said. She left again. I smoothed my napkin in my lap and looked at the jazz pianist and told myself the night was still salvageable. It was still early. Derek had been in a difficult quarter at work. I knew that. I'd seen the tension collecting in him for weeks like storm pressure. He wasn't himself tonight. He was just stressed. I was still making excuses for him when the trouble started. It happened during the Waitress. Our food came out beautifully presented. My sea bass arranged on a pool of saffron beurre blanc, Derek's ribeye flanked by roasted fingerlings and a tower of crispy onions. Diane set each plate down with care, wished us a genuine bon appetit, and left us to it. 3 minutes in, Derek cut into his steak, chewed slowly, and set down his fork. "This is medium," he said. I looked at his steak. The center was a deep, uniform pink. It looked exactly like medium rare to me, but I have never once in 14 years been able to say that without a debate. "It looks right to me," I offered anyway. "Rachel." He said my name like a period. "I know what medium rare looks like." He flagged Diane down. She came promptly, warmly, with that composed expression she'd worn all evening like a second uniform. "This steak," Derek said, "is not medium rare." Diane looked at him. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I can absolutely have the kitchen. I don't need your apology. I need a steak cooked correctly. This is the second time this has happened to me. I specifically said medium rare. Twice. If your kitchen can't manage a basic temperature, maybe someone should be retrained." The table next to us went slightly quieter. I put my fork down. "Derek." "No." He held up a hand, not at Diane, at me, which was almost worse. Then back to her. "This is a $200 dinner. The least I expect is for the kitchen to follow a simple instruction. Is that really so much to ask?" Diane was still. Perfectly, carefully still. "I'll have it replaced immediately," she said. Her voice had not changed. Not one note of it. "See that you do." Derek handed her the plate. "And please make sure whoever is back there understands what medium rare means. I'd hate to think this is how you treat all your customers." The word "you" landed like a finger pointed. Diane took the plate, and as she turned to go, Derek added 6 words, casual as breathing, not even bothering to lower his voice. "Some people just aren't cut out for this." The table beside us went completely silent. I felt the words land in my chest like something dropped from a height. And Diane, she paused, just for a breath. And then she turned back and looked at Derek Calloway with those deep, alert eyes, and something moved through them. Not hurt, not humiliation. Something older and quieter and far more certain. She said nothing. She walked away, and I sat across from my husband of 14 years and felt, for the first time, genuinely afraid of what he had just set in motion. End of Act 1. Approximately 1,950 words. The replacement steak came out in 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my phone, which I had slipped from my purse under the table like a student checking messages during class. Not because I was expecting anything, but because I needed somewhere to look that wasn't Derek's face. 11 minutes of anniversary dinner eaten in the particular silence that follows a scene. The kind of silence that has texture to it. Wait, the jazz pianist had moved on to something melancholy, a slow, wandering version of the very thought of you that felt, under the circumstances, almost satirical. Derek ate his bread, refilled his own water glass, straightened his fork. He did not apologize. He never apologized in the immediate aftermath of something like this. That wasn't how Derek worked. What he did instead was normalize, re-establish the ordinary rhythm of things as though the disruption had already been filed away and resolved. He would mention the pianist, comment on someone's outfit across the room, ask me how my C bass was. And because I had spent 14 years learning the language of his moods, I would follow his lead. I would comment back. I would answer about the C bass. And the moment would be absorbed into the evening like a stone into still water, present somewhere below the surface, but invisible from above. Tonight, I couldn't do it. That was unnecessary, I said. He looked up. The comment. I kept my voice low. Even what you said at the end. Some people just aren't cut out for this. That was unkind, Derek. He set down his water glass with a small, deliberate click. She brought me the wrong temperature steak. She took your order correctly. The kitchen made the call. She represents the kitchen. She's a person. Rachel. Again, my name like punctuation. I'm not going to apologize for having standards. There's a difference between standards and, I stopped. Search for the right word. Contempt. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not yet. More like the faint surprise of someone who didn't expect the word to be that specific. He picked up his fork again. You're being dramatic. The table next to us heard everything. Good for them. I looked down at my sea base, which was no longer something I wanted. The saffron beurre blanc had begun to cool at the edges, the way things do when the moment you plan them for has already passed. I thought about the 6 weeks of anticipation. The phone call with Claude. The black dress. The amber leaves on Michigan Avenue that had looked so much like a painting of something perfect. I thought about how hope is sometimes just the setup for a lesson you weren't ready for yet. Diane returned with Derek's replacement steak at the 11-minute mark, as I said. She set it down the same way she'd set down everything else all evening, with precision and without performance. She had a small ramekin of additional au jus on the side, which nobody had asked for, but which showed the kind of anticipatory professionalism that doesn't come from a training manual. It comes from genuine care about craft. Medium rare, she said. Chef wanted to make sure it was right. Derek cut into it without acknowledgement, inspected the center, gave a single, short nod, the kind of nod that passes for gratitude in men who've forgotten what gratitude sounds like. Diane began to turn. Actually, I said. She stopped, looked at me. I just want to say, I'm sorry. For earlier. The comment was out of line. I felt Derek go still beside me. I didn't look at him. Diane studied me for a moment with those steady brown eyes. Really studied me. The way a person does when they're deciding whether kindness is genuine or performative. Then something softened in her expression. Not relief. More like recognition. One woman seeing another clearly, across a table, across a uniform, across all the space that circumstance and marriage and quiet compromises put between people. Thank you, she said. Simply, enjoy your dinner. She left. Derek said nothing for a full minute. Then, you just apologized to the waitress on my behalf. Yes. In front of me. Also yes. Another silence. Longer this time. I could feel the shape of the argument we weren't having. Its dimensions, its likely duration, the specific points he would land, and the ones I would. We'd had variations of this argument before. Not about a waitress, specifically, but about this thing, this habit of his, this way of looking at service workers and seeing ranks rather than people. I'd nudged and deflected and softened my way around it for years. Tonight, something in me had decided it was tired of being nudged and deflected and softened. I'm going to use the restroom, Derek said finally. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked away with his chin level and his jaw set. I sat alone at our anniversary table and listened to the pianist and looked at the door that Diane had disappeared through and felt, oddly, like I was waiting for something. Like the evening wasn't finished with us yet. I didn't know what was coming. I want to be clear about that. What happened next was not something I could have predicted or prepared for, and if I had known, if someone had leaned across that table in the candlelight and told me what the next 72 hours would look like, I would not have believed them. Not because it was impossible, but because it required the world to be a different shape than the one Derek had always assumed it was. It began with a woman named Patrice. Patrice was seated 2 tables to our left. A woman in her mid-40s, sharply dressed in a camel blazer over a silk blouse. The kind of woman who looks like she was born knowing exactly which fork to use. She had been dining alone, a glass of red wine at her elbow and an e-reader propped against the flower arrangement. The only person in the restaurant reading at dinner and somehow making it look completely intentional. She had, I realized, been watching. Not intrusively. Not with the rubber-necked fascination of someone enjoying a scene, but with the quiet attention of someone who knew something the rest of us didn't, and was deciding what to do with the knowing. When Derek disappeared toward the restrooms, Patrice stood, brought her wine glass, and stopped at our table. "Forgive me for interrupting," she said. Her voice was composed, her accent a clean Midwestern nothing, but there was an authority under it like bedrock. I couldn't help but overhear. "I'm sorry you had to," I said. "And I meant it. Don't be. It wasn't your doing." She paused. "Is your husband in business?" "He looks like business." "Strange question." "He is, yes. Pharmaceutical distribution." "What?" Patrice's expression did something complicated. "Can I ask who he's with?" "Vertex Med Supply. He's the regional sales director." I don't know why I answered so fully. Something about her manner made evasion feel beside the point. She nodded, slowly, like a doctor receiving a test result she'd already suspected. She looked toward where Derek had gone, then back at me. She seemed to make a decision. "The woman who served you tonight," Patrice said, lowering her voice just slightly. "Diane." "Yes." "Do you know who she is?" I looked at her. "She's our waitress." Patrice smiled, not unkindly, but with the particular weight of someone about to change the shape of your evening. "She is tonight, yes." She swirled her wine glass gently. "Diane Whitfield has been volunteering here 2 evenings a month for the last 4 years. Maison Dorée is one of her charitable projects. She funds a culinary training program for at-risk youth through this restaurant. She works a shift herself once a month to stay connected to how the program operates. Keeps herself humble, she says." I stared at her. "Diane Whitfield," Patrice said again, watching my face. "You might know her better as the founder and majority shareholder of Whitfield Capital Group. Healthcare infrastructure investment. About $4 billion under management, last I checked. She's on the boards of 3 hospital networks, 2 of which she let the pause do its work. Our primary accounts for Vertex Med Supply." The pianist had stopped playing. Or maybe he hadn't. Maybe the music was still there, but I'd simply stopped hearing it. The way you stop hearing everything when the world tilts. "She's a billionaire," I said. The word came out barely above a whisper. "Self-made." Patrice nodded. "Grew up in Southside Chicago. Started in healthcare admin. Built a consulting firm from nothing. Turned it into an investment group. She's on the Forbes list. Has been for 6 years." A brief pause. "She's also, and this is the part your husband might find particularly relevant, currently in early discussions with Vertex's parent company about a distribution partnership that would be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million. The floor didn't move. I know the floor didn't move, but it felt like something beneath it did. Some tectonic thing, slow and massive and unstoppable. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed. Patrice looked at me evenly. "Because you apologized to her. And because you looked, when your husband was speaking, like a woman who already knew it was wrong and didn't have the ground to stand on yet." She tilted her head slightly. "Maybe now you do." She returned to her table, picked up her e-reader, and settled back into her wine as though nothing had happened. I sat with my hands flat on the tablecloth and tried to breathe. Derek came back 2 minutes later, sliding into his chair with the eased posture of a man who had used the solitude of a restroom to reset himself back to pleasant. He picked up his steak knife. Looked at me. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine. The sea base get cold." "Derek," I heard my own voice from a strange distance. "What do you know about Whitfield Capital Group?" He stopped cutting. The knife hovered. "What?" "Whitfield Capital. Healthcare infrastructure. Have you heard of them?" Something moved behind his eyes. The rapid, almost involuntary calculation of a man whose professional brain has been unexpectedly activated mid-dinner. Yeah, I know the name." "What?" "They're in discussions with Vertex's parent company. A distribution partnership." "Where are you getting?" He set the knife down. "Rachel, where is this coming from?" I looked at him. At the strong, handsome, defended face of the man I had loved for 16 years, dated for 2, married for 14. At the jaw that went tight when he felt cornered. At the eyes that were smart and warm and frightened underneath all the armor they'd spent decades building. "The woman you spoke to tonight," I said carefully. "Diane." A beat. "The waitress." "Yes." I held his gaze. "Her name is Diane Whitfield." I watched the name land. Watched him search for it in whatever catalog of professional knowledge he kept current and carefully tended. Watched the moment it connected, the slight parting of his lips. The stillness that followed, deeper and more total than any silence we'd shared all evening. "That's," he stopped. "Yes. That can't be." "It is." He turned, slowly, almost involuntarily, and looked toward the kitchen door that Diane had passed through, as though looking at it hard enough might rewrite what had happened on the other side of the last hour. Then he turned back to me, and for the first time all evening, Derek Calloway looked genuinely, unmistakably afraid. Not of consequences, not yet. That would come later. Right now, in this first raw moment, what was in his eyes was something more fundamental. Something that had nothing to do with boardrooms or contracts or the cold arithmetic of professional disaster. It was the look of a man who had just seen himself, clearly, without the filter of the image he'd spent 30 years constructing, and did not particularly like what he found. Speech balloon, have you ever had a moment where you saw something about yourself, or someone you love, and couldn't look away? Tell us in the comments. Rachel, he said. His voice was different. Quieter. Stripped of something. I know. I didn't. I know, Derek. The pianist began again. Something slow and searching and honest. The candle between us burned without flickering in the still, expensive air of Maison Dorée. And somewhere in the back of that restaurant, a billionaire in a black apron was finishing a shift she didn't need to work, carrying plates she didn't need to carry, practicing the craft of staying human in a world that would have gladly excused her from all of it. While at table 14, a regional sales director from Naperville, Illinois sat across from his wife and felt the floor, the very particular floor he'd spent his whole life building, begin, quietly, irrevocably, to shift. We didn't talk about it in the car. That might sound strange, given what we now knew, given the seismic thing that had happened over the course of a $200 dinner. But that was how Derek and I had always handled the moments that were too large for the space between us. We would pack them carefully into silence, like fragile things wrapped for transport, and carry them home. Unpack them later, in the familiar geography of our own walls, where the stakes felt slightly more manageable and the exits were known. So Derek drove, and I watched the Chicago skyline recede in the passenger mirror. Those lit towers against the October dark, beautiful and indifferent, and I held what I knew in my chest like something breakable. We crossed back into Naperville at 10:15. Derek pulled into the garage, killed the engine, sat for a moment with both hands still on the wheel, staring at the wall of the garage the way a man stares at something he isn't actually seeing. I need to make some calls tomorrow, he said. Finally. Not I was wrong. Not I'm sorry. Not even this is bad. Just the operational response. The man who built walls of competence over chasms of feeling, reaching instinctively for the only tools he trusted. Okay, I said. We went inside. I changed out of the black dress and hung it back in the closet and stood for a moment looking at it. This thing I'd chosen so carefully, this costume for a perfect evening, and felt something between grief and exhaustion that didn't have a clean name. Our bedroom was quiet. Derek was in the bathroom. I could hear water running, the specific rhythm of his nighttime routine. The sounds so familiar they'd become a kind of wallpaper I only noticed when something else had stripped everything back to bare surface. I got into bed and looked at the ceiling and thought about Diane Whitfield's eyes. Not her boardroom, not her billions, not the Forbes list that Patrice had mentioned with such careful precision. Her eyes. That moment after Derek's 6 words. Some people just aren't cut out for this. When she had paused with his plate in her hands and looked back at him, and something had moved through her expression that I now understood differently than I had in the moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even dignity, exactly. It was patience. The deep, unshakable patience of someone who has been underestimated so many times that it no longer surprises or wounds. Someone who has learned that the world's misjudgments say nothing about her and everything about the person making them. I thought about what it took to build that kind of patience, what it cost, and I thought about my husband in the next room, running water over his hands, and how the boy from Rockford who grew up wearing the same 2 pairs of jeans had somehow become the man at table 14, and whether those 2 things were connected in a way I hadn't looked at closely enough for long enough. Derek came to bed, turned off the lamp on his side, lay on his back in the dark. Good night, he said. Good night. Neither of us slept for a long time. The call came at 8:47 the next morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee, still in my robe, when I heard Derek's phone buzz on the counter where he'd left it charging. He was in the shower. I glanced at the screen without meaning to, a reflex, not an intrusion, and saw the name. Martin Cross / Vertex National. Martin Cross was Derek's boss's boss. The kind of title that operated from a corporate office in Philadelphia and called regional directors approximately never, unless something had happened that required a conversation that couldn't be emailed. The phone stopped buzzing. Started again 30 seconds later. I took my coffee to the back porch. When Derek came downstairs 15 minutes later, he was already dressed for work, shirt pressed, tie knotted, armor on. But his face had the particular quality of a man who has just received news that has rearranged the interior of something. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me through the glass of the back door, and I could see him deciding how much to tell me. I came back inside. Martin Cross called twice, I said. He nodded. He'd clearly already seen the missed calls. I know. Did you call him back? Just did. Upstairs. He moved to the coffee maker. His movements were careful in the way that people's movements get careful when they're managing a large internal weight. There's been a development. With the Whitfield discussions, I waited. Apparently, he poured. Set down the pot. Stared at his mug. Apparently, Diane Whitfield's office reached out to Vertex's parent company this morning. Early. Before 9. He paused. She's requesting that a different regional contact be assigned to any future partnership discussions. The kitchen was very quiet. She's having you removed from the account, I said. From the discussions? Yes. He picked up the mug. Put it down without drinking. Martin wants to meet in person. Philadelphia. Monday. I looked at my husband, at the set of his shoulders, the tight architecture of a man holding himself together through sheer structural habit. And I felt the complicated simultaneity of emotions that 14 years of marriage produces. Sympathy and frustration, love and anger, the desire to comfort, and the equally strong desire to say you did this. Derek, you walked right into this. I watched you do it, and I said something, and you told me I was being dramatic. I said none of those things. What are you going to tell Martin? I asked instead. The truth, I suppose. His jaw tightened. Some version of it. What version? He finally looked at me directly. And there it was again, that thing I'd seen in his eyes at the restaurant. Not the professional fear. The deeper one. That I behaved poorly. That I didn't know who she was. Would you have behaved differently if you had? The question landed harder than I meant it to. Or maybe exactly as hard as I meant it to. The air in the kitchen shifted. Derek set down his mug. That's not fair, Rachel. It's a real question. It implies that I only treat people decently if they're worth something to me. Is it wrong? Silence. Long, honest, terrible silence. He looked away first. Out the kitchen window at our backyard. The oak tree losing its leaves in slow, steady increments. The garden I'd let go to seed in September. A muscle worked in his jaw. I don't know, he said. Quietly. Like the words cost him. And that small, unguarded admission was more than I'd gotten from him in a long time. More than any of the confident pronouncements, the table scanning, the 12% tips and the borrowed sophistication, and the 6 words delivered to a woman holding his plate. I didn't push it. I let it sit between us, the way you let a bruise announce itself. Present, informative, necessary. Go to Philadelphia, I said. Tell Martin the truth. All of it. He nodded once. Picked up his coffee. Went to get his briefcase. At the door to the garage, he stopped without turning. Rachel. Yeah. I'm sorry. About last night. A beat. About the way it was. He left before I could answer. I stood in the kitchen and held my coffee with both hands and listened to the garage door close. The weekend was a quiet, taut thing. Derek worked from home on Friday and Saturday. The kind of anxious, comprehensive work that is equal parts productivity and displacement activity. Phone calls behind the closed door of his home office. Emails I wasn't privy to. The sound of his chair pushing back and his feet pacing, back and forth across the hardwood. The metronome of a man working a problem from every angle. I taught, graded papers, made dinner, moved through our house with the careful awareness of someone navigating shared space during a ceasefire. Our daughter, Emma, 13, sharp as a tack, blessedly away at her friend Olivia's house for the weekend, was the one mercy. I couldn't have managed her questions on top of everything else. Emma had Derek's eyes and my stubbornness and the preternatural ability of teenagers to detect marital tension from 3 rooms away and ask about it directly, without cushion or preamble. Saturday night, Derek and I ate dinner together at the kitchen table. Pasta I'd made from scratch, a bottle of red I'd opened without really deciding to. He told me a little more about the situation. Not everything. Derek processes in layers, releases information in stages, always has, but enough. Vertex's parent company was Halloran Group, based in Philadelphia. The Whitfield Capital Partnership discussions had been ongoing for 8 months. Quiet, careful, the kind of slow-build institutional courtship that happens above the level of regional directors, but whose downstream consequences land squarely on people like Derek. If the partnership went through as originally structured, Vertex's Midwest distribution network, Derek's territory, stood to expand by 30% over 2 years. It was, in pharmaceutical distribution terms, career-defining. And Derek had insulted the woman whose signature was required. There's more, he said. He was looking at his pasta. Martin did some background. Diane Whitfield, She grew up in Chicago. South Side. I know. I was told that. He looked up. By who? A woman at the restaurant. Another diner. I paused. She knew who Diane was. Something moved across Derek's face. And she told you. She told me you'd be wise to know. He was quiet for a moment. South Side, Chicago. Single mother. Worked her way through DePaul University on financial aid and 2 part-time jobs. His voice had a quality I couldn't immediately name until I could. It was recognition. The specific, uncomfortable resonance of a story that rhymes with your own. Started as a billing coordinator at a community hospital. Built from there. He shook his head slightly. She's more like me than I. He stopped. Then you assumed, I finished. Yeah. He pushed pasta around his plate. Then I assumed. I let him sit with that. Because that was the real not under all of it, wasn't it? The thing that the professional disaster and the marital tension and the sleepless nights were all orbiting. Not the account. Not Martin Cross or the $40 million or the Philadelphia meeting. Those were consequences. The cause was something older and more private. Derek Calloway had grown up poor and worked furiously to escape it. And somewhere in that furious escape he had begun to do to others exactly what the world had once done to him. He had looked at people in service positions and seen not his mother, not himself at 22, not the human complexity of a person navigating their circumstances with dignity and craft. He had seen a category, a rank, a confirmation that he had made it to the other side of something. And the woman in the black apron at table 14 had been, without knowing it, his mirror. I didn't say any of that at dinner. I saved it, filed it under the conversation we still needed to have, in the thick folder I had been maintaining for some years. Sunday brought something I didn't expect. I was grading papers at the dining room table, my 11th grader's essays on the Great Gatsby, which felt, given the week's events, almost aggressively on the nose, when Derek appeared in the doorway holding his phone with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not fear. Not the defensive tightness of a man managing a crisis. Something more exposed than that. More hesitant. I found her email, he said. I looked up from F. Scott Fitzgerald in my red pen. Whose? Diane Whitfield's. He looked at the phone. Her professional contact. It's public, on the Whitfield Capital website. He paused. I've been sitting with a draft for 2 hours. I put down my pen. I don't know if it's appropriate, he said, to contact her directly. Martin would probably tell me not to. Legal would definitely tell me not to. He leaned against the doorframe. But I keep thinking, this isn't about the account. I mean, it is. Obviously, it has real professional consequences that I have to address. But that's not why I want to write it. Why do you want to write it? He was quiet for a long moment. In the yard behind him, through the window, the oak tree dropped 3 leaves in slow succession. Because what I said to her was wrong, he said. Not strategically wrong. Not professionally ill-advised. Just wrong. She was doing her job. She was doing it well. And I spoke to her like she was. He stopped. His throat worked. Like she was the thing I used to be afraid of becoming. The dining room was very still. I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. And saw, beneath the pressed shirt and the practiced composure, the 9-year-old in Rockford whose father had left and whose mother smelled like other people's fabric softener and who had decided, somewhere in the architecture of his young, unprotected heart, that the only way to be safe was to never be at the bottom of anything again. I felt the anger in me. And there was anger, real and justified. Make no mistake. Make room. Just slightly. Just enough. Send the email, I said. He looked at me. You think? I think it's the right thing to do. Separate from every other thing. The account, Martin, Philadelphia, it's the right thing to do. I held his gaze. But Derek, it can't be about the account. If there is one word in that email that sounds like damage control, there isn't. She'll know. I know she'll know. He straightened up from the doorframe. That's why it took me 2 hours. He went back to his office. I stared at my stack of Gatsby essays for a long moment. All these 16-year-olds writing about illusion and identity and the green light at the end of the dock. And then I picked up my red pen and kept going. Speech balloon, do you believe people can genuinely change? Or is an apology without changed behavior just noise? We'd love to know what you think in the comments. The house was quiet. Outside, the oak tree kept letting go. He sent the email at 4:17 on Sunday afternoon. He didn't show it to me first. I didn't ask to see it. Some things need to be a person's own, entirely, without witness or editorial, for them to mean anything at all. He came back to the dining room afterward and sat down across from me at the table and looked like a man who had just set something down that he'd been carrying for a very long time. Not relieved exactly, just lighter, in the specific way that honesty makes you lighter, even when you don't know yet what it's going to cost. Okay, he said. Okay, I agreed. We sat together as the October afternoon moved through its last light, and neither of us spoke, and it wasn't the silence of avoidance or the silence of exhaustion. It was the silence of two people who had been through something together and were, for the moment, simply being in the same place at the same time. It wasn't resolution. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is exactly enough. Derek left for Philadelphia on Monday morning at 5:45. I heard him moving through the house in the dark, the careful, considerately quiet movements of someone trying not to wake the people they love, which is its own kind of tenderness, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The coffee maker clicking on because he'd said it the night before. The soft drag of his roller bag across the hardwood in the hallway. The particular sound of the front door closing, not slammed, not careless, but deliberate. Like a period at the end of a sentence he was still composing. I lay in bed and listened and didn't pretend to be asleep. Emma was up at 7, already fully operational in the way of 13-year-olds who have not yet learned to ease into mornings. Backpack on the kitchen chair, phone in hand, eating cereal, and telling me about something that had happened at Olivia's house involving a misunderstanding about a group chat and several parties who had opinions about it. I listened and responded at the appropriate moments and made her lunch and watched her walk to the end of our driveway to meet her carpool. Then I stood at the kitchen window with my second cup of coffee and thought about my husband on a plane to Philadelphia and a woman named Diane Whitfield somewhere in a glass-walled office above the Chicago skyline. And I thought about what Derek had written in that email, which I still hadn't read. I thought about whether it was enough. I thought about whether enough was even the right metric. I found out about the email's reception not from Derek, but from a colleague. Sandra Okafor taught AP History at Westbridge and was my closest friend in the building. A compact, precise woman from Cincinnati with the laugh of someone twice her size and the political intelligence of someone who had spent 20 years navigating the particular ecosystem of a public high school and emerged sharpened rather than dulled. We ate lunch together most Mondays in her classroom, surrounded by her timelines and primary source posters, eating whatever we'd packed and talking about everything. That Monday, I told her, not everything. I don't do everything easily, even with Sandra. But enough. The restaurant. Derek's comment. Diane Whitfield. The professional consequences. The email. Sandra listened the way she always listened. Fully, without interrupting, her sandwich held but uneaten, her eyes tracking the emotional content rather than just the plot. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. How are you, she asked. Not what's going to happen, or do you think he'll lose his job? How was I? I considered the question honestly. I'm angry, I said. Still, underneath everything else, I'm angry. Not just about the restaurant, about all the times before it. All the times I let it go. You didn't let it go, Sandra said. You addressed it. I nudged at it, and then retreated when he pushed back. That's not the same as addressing it. She tilted her head. Are you angry at yourself too? Yes. Good, she said. Not unkindly. That means you're being honest about it. She finally took a bite of her sandwich. And the email? He sent it Sunday afternoon. I don't know if she's read it. I don't know if she'll respond. What did it say? I don't know. He didn't show me. Sandra raised an eyebrow. And that doesn't bother you? I thought about it. No. It would have bothered me a week ago. But now I paused. I think he needed it to be his. Does that make sense? It makes complete sense. She nodded slowly. The question is whether Diane Whitfield sees it that way. I know. And the bigger question, Sandra said, with the careful delivery of someone who loves you and is going to say the true thing anyway, is what happens between you and Derek regardless of how she responds. Because the account and the meeting with Martin, those are real, but they're external. The thing you described, that habit of his, that way he has, that's not a Diane Whitfield problem. That one is yours to work out together. I looked at my sandwich. I know that too. Are you going to? I was quiet for a moment. Outside Sandra's classroom window, the school's courtyard maple had gone the deep red of something that had decided, finally, to be exactly what it was. I think he's trying, I said. For the first time. Actually trying, rather than just managing the optics of trying. There's a difference, and I can feel it. Then hold him to it, Sanders said simply. With love. But hold him to it. Derek called at 6:15 Monday evening. I was helping Emma with an algebra problem, the kind involving trains departing from different cities that has confounded generations of 8th graders and serves no discernible real-world purpose, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I handed Emma my pencil and took the call to the back porch. How'd it go? I said. A pause. Long enough to be informative. It was a lot, he said. His voice was different from when he'd left that morning. Stripped down in a way I associated with emotional expenditure. The voice of a man who had used himself up on something real. Tell me. He did. The meeting with Martin Cross had been in a conference room on the 23rd floor of Halloran Group's Philadelphia office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Delaware River. A table long enough to suggest consequence. Martin Cross was 58, silver-haired, the kind of senior executive who had gotten to his position by being able to read a room and a person with equal precision. He was accompanied by Joanna Trent, Halloran's head of strategic partnerships, and a corporate attorney named Davis whose last name Derek hadn't caught. Derek had walked in and, before Martin could set the agenda, had asked to speak first. He told them what happened. All of it. Not the crisis-managed version, not the carefully angled professional narrative. The actual version. The dinner, the steak temperature, the 6 words, Rachel's apology to Diane, the drive home in silence. He told them about recognizing Diane's name, about the sleepless night, about the email he had sent on Sunday. Martin Cross had listened without expression. Joanna Trent had made notes. The attorney named Davis had looked at the table. When Derek finished, Martin had been quiet for a long moment. Then, did you know who she was when you spoke to her? No. Would it have changed how you spoke to her? Derek told me he had looked at Martin Cross across that long table and thought about Rachel asking him the same question across their kitchen counter and how he had answered. I'd like to say yes, Derek had told Martin. But the honest answer is I don't know. And that's the problem I'm trying to fix. Not the account. Me. Another silence. Then Martin had looked at Joanna Trent, and something had passed between them. The wordless communication of people who have worked together long enough to have a shared language. There's something else, Martin had said then. He'd slid a printed sheet across the table. This came through our strategic partnerships email this morning. Forwarded to me from Halloran's CEO at 9 a.m. Derek had looked at the paper. It was a forwarded email. The original sender was diane.whitfield@whitfieldcapital.com. The timestamp was Sunday, 6:41 p.m., 2 hours and 24 minutes after Derek had sent his message. On the back porch of our Naperville house, standing in the October dark with the phone pressed to my ear, I closed my eyes. What did it say? I asked. Derek read it to me. He'd taken a photo of it on his phone. I could hear the slight change in his voice as he switched from speaking to reading. A shift in register, like a man stepping carefully onto uncertain ground. Mr. Cross, I'm writing to follow up on a personal matter that intersects with our ongoing partnership discussions. On Thursday evening, I was working a volunteer shift at Maison Doré, a culinary training program I support on Chicago's North Side. I was serving a table occupied by a Mr. Derek Calloway, identified as a regional director with Vertex Med Supply, and his wife. Mr. Calloway made a comment at the end of an exchange that was dismissive and unkind. I want to be clear that moments like these are not unusual in service environments, and I did not take it personally in the way one might expect. I mention it not as a complaint, but as context. Yesterday afternoon, I received an unsolicited email from Mr. Calloway. I want to be transparent with you about its contents. It was an apology. A thorough one. It made no mention of our business discussions, referenced no professional context, and did not in any way appear to be motivated by damage control. It was, as far as I could determine, simply a man attempting to account for his behavior. That kind of accountability is not common, in my experience. I am not in the habit of allowing a single evening's interaction, in either direction, to determine my business decisions. The Whitfield-Halloran discussions should proceed on their merits. However, I would add one observation. The person who interests me, in terms of what this partnership might look like in practice, is not the man at the restaurant on Thursday. It is the man who wrote that email on Sunday. I'd be open to a conversation. Best, Diane Whitfield. I stood on my back porch in the dark for a long time after Derek finished reading. The oak tree at the edge of our yard was a black shape against a navy sky, its remaining leaves silver where the neighbor's light caught them. Somewhere down the street, someone was burning leaves, that particular autumn smell, wood smoke, and something sweet and final, the smell of things releasing what they've held all season. Rachel, Derek's voice, careful in my ear. You still there? I'm here. Say something. I thought about what to say. There was so much. There was the relief, genuine, flooding relief, for the account, for his career, for the practical architecture of our life that had been trembling since Thursday. There was the complicated emotion of learning what Derek had written without reading it, knowing now that it had been real enough to move a woman who had every reason to be unmoved. There was something that felt like pride, not uncomplicated, not without its shadow of why did it take this, but pride nonetheless. And underneath all of it, deeper than the relief and the pride and the still present anger, there was love. The stubborn, inconvenient, load-bearing kind. The kind that has seen the worst of someone and chosen to stay not out of inertia or fear, but out of the genuine belief that the worst of someone is not the whole of them. Come home, I said. A breath. Yeah, we have things to talk about. Real things. Not the account, us things. I know. I'm not going to pretend Thursday didn't happen, or that it was the first time. I'm not asking you to. And I'm not going to pretend I was entirely blameless. I let too much go for too long. A pause. Rachel, I'm not saying that to be self-flagellating. I'm saying it because when we talk, I want us to be honest about all of it. The whole thing. Not just the restaurant. A longer pause this time. I could hear him breathing, and the faint ambient sound of a Philadelphia hotel room. The hum of climate control, the distant murmur of the city. Okay, he said. Quietly. All of it. Good. I looked up at the oak tree, bare branching against the dark. And Derek. Yeah. The email you wrote. Whatever was in it. It was enough to move her. I want you to remember that. Not because of the account. Because it means you're capable of it. The real version of you. The one that exists under all the rest of it. I paused. I married that man. I want him back. The silence that followed was the fullest silence we'd had in years. Full of the weight of 14 years and all the ways we'd shaped each other and failed each other and held each other up. Full of Emma doing algebra at the kitchen table inside, and the burning leaf smell from down the street, and the October dark pressing gently against everything. I'm working on it, Derek said. And the way he said it, not defensive, not performative, just plain and tired and sincere, was the most honest thing I'd heard from him in longer than I could pinpoint. I know, I said. I can tell. He came home Tuesday evening. Emma launched herself at him in the front hallway with the unself-conscious physical affection of a child who has not yet learned to modulate her love for a parent based on whether they deserve it in a particular moment. And watching Derek catch her, hold her, press his face into the top of her hair with his eyes closed, I felt the tight thing in my chest ease by one more degree. We had dinner together, the three of us, pasta again, because Emma had requested it and Derek had actually made it himself, standing at the stove in his work shirt with his sleeves rolled up, while Emma sat on the counter telling him about the group chat situation, which had apparently been partially resolved and then reignited with new information. He listened. He asked questions. He laughed, genuinely, the Rayal laugh, the one from before the armor. After Emma went to bed, we sat at the kitchen table with decaf and the particular quietness of a house with a sleeping child in it, which is one of the most specific kinds of peace that exists. I told him what Sandra had said. He listened without interrupting. He told me more about the email, not all of it, but enough. He'd written about the drive home, about recognizing the shape of what he'd done, about Rockford, and his mother, and the way he'd built certain habits of perception that had served him in some ways and corroded him in others. He'd written it. He said, the way you write something when you've decided it's going to be honest regardless of the outcome, without editing for reception. I want to talk to someone, he said. A therapist. I've been thinking about it since the drive home Thursday night, actually, before I even knew about the account. I looked at him across the table. I think that's a good idea. Will you come with me? Some of the time, at least. Yes. He nodded, looked at his mug, then at me, and the look was open, unguarded in a way that his face had not been for a very long time. The face of a man who had walked through a fire he'd accidentally set, and come out the other side with fewer walls than he'd gone in with. I'm sorry, Rachel. He said it simply. Not rushed, not elaborated, not cushioned. For Thursday. For all the Thursdays before it. For the times you said something, and I made you feel like you were being dramatic. You weren't being dramatic. You were seeing me clearly, and I wasn't ready to be seen. I held his gaze. 14 years of Christmases and arguments and a daughter and a mortgage and the cracked side mirror I kept meaning to fix, and the Sunday evenings with Chardonnay and student essays. 14 years of loving someone whose love was real, but whose habits had cost us both something we needed to account for. Thank you, I said, for saying that. I meant it. I know you did. That's why I'm thanking you. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. We're going to be okay, Derek. But we have to actually do the work. Not manage the optics of doing the work. The actual work. I know. He turned his hand over and held mine. I'm ready. Speech balloon, have you ever been at a crossroads in a relationship where someone finally said the thing you've been waiting to hear? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. Outside our kitchen window, the oak tree stood stripped and patient in the October night, its bare branches reaching without apology into a sky full of cold, indifferent stars. Ready, like everything that has survived a season, for whatever came next. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of ordinary life moving over and around the extraordinary thing that had happened to us. The way water moves over a stone that has fallen into a stream, gradually, persistently, reshaping the current without erasing it. Derek started seeing a therapist named Dr. Marcus Webb, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with an office in Oak Park, and the kind of unhurried attentiveness that Derek had initially found uncomfortable and was slowly, visibly, learning to sit with. He went every Thursday evening. He came home quieter than he left, in the way that honest work makes you quiet, not depleted, but settled, like a room after it's been cleaned properly rather than just tidied. I went with him twice in those 3 weeks. The first time was awkward in the particular way that genuine vulnerability is always awkward. The fumbling exposure of being seen together in the full inventory of your difficulties, without the private shorthand of your own walls. Derek talked about Rockford, about his father leaving, about the specific shame of poverty that doesn't fade just because the poverty does. I talked about the years of softening and retreating, about the particular exhaustion of loving someone whose defenses you keep trying to work around rather than asking them to lower. Dr. Webb listened to all of it without judgment and with the occasional question that had the quality of a key turning in a lock, small, precise, opening something larger than itself. It wasn't easy. Easy was never what we were going for. Emma noticed the change before she named it. She was like that, observant in the instinctive, untheorized way of children who have grown up in households with emotional weather patterns. She noticed atmospheres, shifts in the barometric pressure of a room. For weeks, she had been moving through the house with a certain careful attentiveness, tracking, cataloging, not asking directly because she sensed the asking wasn't right yet. Then one Saturday morning in early November, she came downstairs to find Derek making pancakes from scratch. Not the box mix, actual scratch, with a recipe he'd pulled up on his phone and was following with the focused seriousness he usually applied to quarterly projections. And she stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him for a long moment. "Dad." "Morning, Em. Are you okay?" He turned from the stove, looked at her, really looked at her, with the full attention that had been surfacing more consistently in him over the past weeks. "Yeah, Bug. I am." A pause. "Better than okay, actually. Getting there." She studied him for another moment with those sharp eyes that were so like his, and so like mine it sometimes felt like looking at both of us at once. Then she went to the cabinet for a glass, poured herself orange juice, and said, "Good. You've been weird lately." "I know. A good weird though. Like when a computer finally finishes updating." Derek laughed. The real laugh. "That's exactly what it feels like." Emma took her orange juice to the kitchen table and opened her laptop, apparently satisfied. I stood in the hallway where I'd been listening and felt something in my chest that was uncomplicated and warm. The specific happiness of watching people you love find their way back to each other, which is different from romantic happiness, and in some ways deeper. The call from Whitfield Capital came on a Wednesday. Not to Derek, to Vertex's strategic partnerships team, who related to Halloran, who related to Martin Cross, who called Derek directly. The message was straightforward. Diane Whitfield's office was proposing a preliminary in-person meeting to discuss the partnership framework. Standard business. Conference room, agenda, The whole infrastructure of professional relationship building. There was a secondary item, noted almost as an aside by Martin, the way important things are sometimes delivered, wrapped in procedural language to soften their specificity. Diane Whitfield had requested, personally, that Derek Calloway attend. Not as the lead, Joanna Trent would run the meeting, but present, in the room. Derek called me from his car in the Vertex parking lot after getting off with Martin. I could hear the particular quality of stillness in his voice that I had come to associate, over the past weeks, with genuine feeling being held carefully rather than managed away. She wants me there, he said. I heard. Why would she? He stopped. Started again. Why would she want me there, Rachel? I thought about it. About Diane Whitfield's email. The person who interests me is not the man at the restaurant on Thursday, but the man who wrote the email on Sunday. About a woman who had grown up on the south side of Chicago and worked her way through DePaul on financial aid and 2 part-time jobs and built $4 billion from a billing coordinator's desk. About the kind of person who volunteers 2 evenings a month at a restaurant she funds, putting on a black apron and carrying plates, not for optics but for the work itself, for the staying honest about what things cost. Because she's curious, I said, about whether the man in the email is consistent, whether he holds. A long pause. And if he doesn't, then he doesn't, I said. But you do, Derek. You hold. I've watched you hold for 3 weeks. Go be that person in the room. The meeting was on a Tuesday in mid-November. Halloran Group's Chicago office, a sleek tower on Wacker Drive with the kind of lobby that makes you feel slightly underdressed regardless of what you're wearing. Derek left home at 7:30 in his best suit, not the Nordstrom charcoal this time, but a navy one, quieter, less declarative. He'd had his hair cut the weekend before. He looked good. He looked, more importantly, like himself, the deeper self, the one that had been making its way toward the surface for 3 weeks like something growing toward light. I was at school, 3rd period, my 11th graders deep in a Socratic seminar on the Great Gatsby's final pages, arguing about whether Gatsby's dream was noble or delusional, whether the green light was hope or illusion, whether it mattered if the thing you were reaching for was real or not. I kept my phone on the corner of my desk on silent. He texted at 11:47. It went well. More than well. Tell you everything tonight. Also, she asked about you. I read it 3 times standing in the hallway between classes, the flow of students parting around me like a stream around a still point. She asked about you. That night, after Emma was in bed, Derek told me everything. The meeting had been professional and substantive, partnership frameworks, distribution networks, compliance structures, the careful architecture of 2 organizations deciding whether to trust each other with something significant. Joanna Trent had run it capably. Derek had contributed where his regional knowledge was relevant, had spoken when spoken to, had listened more than he talked. Diane Whitfield had arrived 12 minutes into the meeting, which Derek suspected was intentional, a small test of the room's ability to function in her absence, a founder's habit of checking whether things worked without her. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, her silver-threaded hair down this time, and she carried herself with the particular authority of someone who has spent so long being the most capable person in most rooms that they've stopped needing to signal it. She shook hands around the table. When she got to Derek, she paused. Not dramatically, not for effect, just a half-beat longer than the others. Mr. Calloway, she said. Ms. Whitfield. He met her eyes. It's good to meet you properly. Something in her expression, some careful, evaluating thing, settled. Yes, she said. I think it is. She took her seat. The meeting continued. At the end, as people were gathering their folders and the room was shifting into the informal post-meeting conversation that is often where the real work happens, Diane had appeared beside Derek's chair. Walk with me a moment, she said. They walked to the window at the end of the conference room, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Chicago River, the city laid out below them in its Tuesday afternoon self. She stood looking at it for a moment. I grew up 7 miles from here, she said, not opening a conversation, making a statement, placing a fact. You can't see it from this window, but you can feel it. The distance and the closeness at the same time. Derek had looked at the river. I grew up in Rockford, he said. I know something about that distance. A pause. I know, she said. Your email told me. He had turned to look at her. She was still looking at the city. I wasn't gentle in that email, he said. About what I saw in myself. No, you weren't. She glanced at him then. That's why I read it 4 times. Something moved through her expression, not quite a smile, but close to the thing that precedes one. Men in your position don't typically write emails like that. They write emails that sound like apologies, but are actually positioning documents. Yours wasn't. I didn't want it to be. I know. She looked back at the city. I've received a lot of apologies in my career, Mr. Calloway. From people who underestimated me, dismissed me, spoke to me the way you spoke to me at that restaurant. And that was, I want you to know, far from the worst I've experienced. She paused. The apologies are usually about the apologizer, how they feel about what they did, their discomfort with the consequences. A beat. Yours was about me. It acknowledged what the comment communicated, not just that it was rude, but what it assumed. About who I was. What I was worth. She turned to face him fully. That's a different thing. Derek had said, and this was the part, when he told me, that made me have to set down my tea and look away for a moment. I had a lot of time to think about what it communicated. My wife helped me see it. She's been trying to help me see a lot of things for a long time. I wasn't ready. Diane had looked at him with those steady, deep brown eyes. She apologized to me first, she said. That night. Before she knew who I was. I know. Hold on to that, Diane Whitfield said quietly. A person who apologizes when there's nothing to gain from it. That's the real thing. Don't make her do your seeing for you. Derek had nodded. Once. The way you nod when something true has just found the exact place in you it was looking for. I'm working on that, he said. Good. She had extended her hand. He shook it. I'll see you at the next meeting, Mr. Calloway. Derek. A brief pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, that thing that was close to a smile arrived the rest of the way. Derek, she said. He told me all of it at our kitchen table, with decaf and the quiet house around us. And when he finished I sat with it for a long moment. The whole shape of it, the arc from table 14 to this kitchen, from 6 careless words to a window on Wacker Drive, from a man who looked at a waitress and saw a category to a man sitting across from me trying, with real effort and real humility, to be the person he'd always had inside him under all that armor. Don't make her do your seeing for you. I thought about that. About what it meant, for Derek, yes, but also for me. For the years of nudging and retreating. For the exhaustion of softening truths until they were barely recognizable. For my own part in the pattern we'd built together. The way 2 people always co-author the life they share, for better and for worse. I had work to do too. The work of saying the true thing when I saw it, rather than filing it under later until the folder got too heavy. The work of trusting that our marriage was sturdy enough to hold honesty without breaking. The work of believing, really believing, that Derek was capable of being seen and remaining. She said something to me. I told him. The woman at the restaurant. Patrice, the one who told me who Diane was. Derek looked at me. What did she say? She said, maybe now you have the ground to stand on. I paused. I've been thinking about that. About what it means to have ground. I think ground isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build. Together. By deciding the truth is worth the discomfort. He held my gaze for a long moment. Are we building it? I think we are, I said. Finally. Actually building it. Not decorating the surface of it. He reached across the table. I took his hand. I love you, Rachel. Simple. Unarmored. The words without the fortress around them. I love you too, Derek. I squeezed his hand. All of you. Including the work-in-progress parts. He laughed. Softly. The real laugh. And the kitchen held it. Warm and ordinary in hours. In the weeks that followed, things changed in the ways that real change happens. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the accumulation of small and consistent things that add up, over time, to a different life. Derek continued with Dr. Webb every Thursday. He started coming home from work and leaving his phone in the kitchen rather than carrying it to his office. A small thing, but the kind of small thing that is actually not small at all. He coached Emma's school quiz bowl team on Wednesday evenings. Something she'd been asking him to do for a year and a half, and that he'd always found reasons to defer. He tipped 25% at restaurants, always, without commentary. He never again spoke to a server without looking at them. I started saying the true thing when I saw it. Not as accusation, not as lecture, but as the simple offering of what I actually observed. Some of those conversations were hard. A few of them escalated before they resolved. All of them landed somewhere better than the silence would have. We went to Dr. Webb together twice a month, and separately once a week. It was expensive in the way that necessary things are sometimes expensive, and worth it in the way that necessary things always are. Emma, for her part, blossomed in the changed atmosphere of our home with the unconscious responsiveness of a plant moved to better light. More talkative at dinner, more willing to bring her problems to us, more herself in the particular way that children become more themselves when the adults around them are becoming more themselves too. The Whitfield-Halloran partnership was formally announced in January. A $43 million distribution framework, the largest in Vertex's Midwest history. Derek was named as the regional lead, a decision that came, Martin Cross told him quietly, with Diane Whitfield's specific endorsement. The night the announcement went internal, Derek came home and put a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator and then didn't mention it. He made dinner. He helped Emma with her history project. He watched TV with me on the couch with the ordinary intimacy of a Tuesday evening. At 10 o'clock, when Emma was in bed and the house was quiet, he got up and came back with the champagne and 2 glasses and set them on the coffee table. "I almost didn't buy this," he said, sitting back down beside me. "Why?" "Because the thing worth celebrating isn't the deal." He looked at the bottle. The deal is good, and I'm grateful for it, and I know what it took to get here. But it's not," he stopped. "You are what's worth celebrating. This." He gestured between us, at the couch, the room, the quiet house. "The fact that we're still here. That you didn't," his voice did something. He steadied it. "That you stayed and made me look at myself. That takes more strength than anything I've done in a boardroom." I looked at the man beside me, this complicated, wounded, striving, loving, work-in-progress man who was finally doing the work. I picked up the champagne. "Open it, Derek." He did. We drank it on the couch with our feet tucked up and the TV on low and the January dark pressed against the windows, and it tasted like something earned. Not given, not stumbled into, not performed for an audience. Earned. Together. The hard and the only way. I saw Diane Whitfield one more time. It was in February, at a fundraiser for the culinary training program at Maison Doré, an annual event that Vertex had, as part of the new partnership framework, become a corporate sponsor of. Derek had asked me to come with him. I almost said no. Then I thought about ground. About building it. I said yes. The restaurant had been transformed for the evening. Tables pushed back, the room open and warm. The jazz pianist playing something celebratory and alive. The culinary students themselves served the food they'd prepared. Young people in clean white aprons, some of them barely older than Emma, carrying plates with the proud concentration of people discovering for the first time what they were capable of. I was watching them when Diane Whitfield appeared beside me. She was in a deep burgundy dress, her silver-threaded hair loose, a glass of white wine in her hand. Off-duty from the black apron. Fully, comfortably herself. "Mrs. Calloway," she said. "Rachel," I said. "Please." "Rachel." She looked out at the room, at the students, the guests, the warm machinery of the evening she'd built. "What do you think?" "I think it's remarkable," I said honestly. "What you've built here. What it does for these kids." She nodded, watching a young man of maybe 19 carefully set down a plate with the focused ceremony of someone who understood the significance of the gesture. "I was 22 when someone did something like this for me," she said. "Gave me a room to prove myself in. It changes the whole equation." She paused. "I've been doing it ever since." I looked at her profile, the high cheekbones, the steady eyes, the composure of someone who has been through fire and knows it cannot consume her. "I want to thank you," I said. She turned to look at me. "For the email you sent to Martin Cross. For giving Derek the chance to be in that room. I paused, finding the right words. For seeing the man in the Sunday email rather than the man at table 14. Not everyone would have. Diane Whitfield looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something I've turned over in my mind many times since, like a stone that reveals different colors depending on how the light hits it. "I've been underestimated my whole life," she said quietly. "By men like your husband. By systems that saw my address before they saw my capability. By rooms that felt like they were built for people who weren't me." She looked back at the room. "And I had a choice, every single time. I could let it calcify into bitterness. And believe me, I understand the appeal. Or I could stay curious about what people were capable of becoming." A pause. "I'm more interested in who people are trying to be than in who they were at their worst moment. The trying is where the real information is." She looked at me. Your husband is trying, she said. That matters. Yes, I said. He is. She raised her glass slightly. A small, genuine toast between two women who had found themselves, by the improbable navigation of one October evening, on the same side of something important. I raised mine. Across the room, Derek was talking to one of the culinary students, leaning in, listening, genuinely engaged, the way he had been learning to be. The student was showing him something on his phone, probably a dish he'd developed, and Derek was looking at it with real interest and saying something that made the young man stand a little taller. I watched my husband make someone feel seen, and I thought this is what it looks like when the walls come down. Not perfectly, not permanently, not without maintenance and vigilance and the ongoing willingness to choose honesty over comfort. But this is what remains when the armor finally costs more than it protects. A man who looks at people and sees people. It was, in the end, the thing I had always known he was capable of. It just took a woman in a black apron, carrying his plate with perfect composure, to show him the door. And his own choice, finally, bravely, all on his own, to walk through it. If this story moved you, if you've ever watched someone you love find their way back to themselves, or if you've been the one finding your way back, we want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Your story matters, and this community is listening. What began as one man's careless 6 words in a candlelit restaurant became the slow, necessary dismantling of a fortress he'd been building since he was 9 years old. Derek Calloway didn't lose his marriage. He didn't lose his career. He gained something rarer, the ability to see himself clearly and the courage to choose differently. Rachel stayed not out of weakness, but out of the fierce, clear-eyed love of a woman who always knew who her husband could be. And Diane Whitfield, the woman who needed nothing from either of them, gave them both a gift she didn't have to give. The grace of being believed capable of better. 3 people, 1 restaurant, 1 October evening that changed everything. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.